when we would normally do something like this, and so there's no ice cream, even for me. This is too early for ice cream. But I do have my tea, Earl Grey, lots of honey. Honey is sweet enough for me this morning, and even sweeter, this is Ascension Day, and I have a great guest, a friend of mine, Bruce Jaeger. You may have heard of him, or at least the book that we put out together here. It's a lot of his original ideas, and I'm excited that we finally got this thing out, and we're sharing it with the world. And so he is here with me this morning to talk about that, just to get a chance to get to know him a little bit. But, of course, we have to start with the question we ask everybody, which is, okay, taste and see that the Lord is good, Psalm 34:8. What's so sweet about Jesus, Bruce?
Well, good morning. Thanks for partnering with me on the book and for inviting me to join you on this podcast. We could start and finish with this question, I guess. What's sweet about Jesus for me? I like to focus on just two or three major things. And of course, Jesus has forgiven me. Every Christian can say that. I think for me, when I say that, knowing the decades of my life and how much he's forgiven makes it all the sweeter. I'd like to think that at my station in life today, as maybe a maturing Christian who's gone through a lot and read a lot, that I would be more perfected, still not. And I'm ashamed of a lot of things that I say and do and think and fail to do, and he forgives it all. And by forgiving it all, he welcomes me into relationship with him and with the Father. And that is not insignificant at all. In fact, it's the primary thing. It just makes me happy, and primary thing that puts me at peace with God. I think beyond that, we're talking today. It's according to a church calendar. It's the day we celebrate Jesus' ascension back to heaven to be with his Father and be in glory. You precede that just a little bit, not just with his death, which provides that forgiveness, but with his resurrection, which is the second thing that's like super sweet to me about Jesus. Because he said, hey, since I live, you're going to live also. I've got a few more years on this body than you do, Emil, and that means I look squarely in the face at mortality a lot more often than you do.
Maybe.
And I've had some amazing brushes with death, and not in the distant, some in the distant past, but some more recently. And through all of that, I'm reminded that my body may die, but I'll be alive again. And that is just tremendous assurance and tremendous sweetness, knowing that, and maybe it's a self-centered view or something, that you think of what's going to happen to me rather than what God did for me. But we all do. And when I think my days are numbered, all everybody's days are numbered, but those are days on earth that are numbered, not days with God that are numbered. And what is a day going to be like in eternity? Well, there's probably no such concept as a day, even it's just going to be forever. So this, the promise of resurrected body and a soul that lives on forever, the certainty of that promise, because God fulfilled all of his promises, and Jesus, according to church calendar, then died, rose provided forgiveness of sins for me, provided eternal life for me, and now he's in heaven preparing a place. I can't really define whether that's heaven or earth, where that place is going to be with him and the Father forever. That's pretty sweet. Just as part of that, you had mentioned taste and see that the Lord is good. I'll just kind of jump on that taste part a little bit and go right back to the whole idea of mortality and brushes with my own mortality and brushes with death. I've had 2 or 3, and it's been over the last several years, but one more recently, 2 or 3 trips to the emergency room where my throat swelled up, I couldn't breathe, and within minutes I could have died. And you go to the emergency room for the doctors to be able to provide you medicines to bring the swelling down and things like that. But through those episodes, I just want to say I was at peace. And it's like, if this is it, if you're taking me now in the next 10, 15 minutes, that's okay. I'll be someplace a lot better. And that is a sweetness that I've come to know. It's one of those things where, why am I not just like panicky and hair on fire and this could be it, and let me scroll a note to my wife and let me scroll a note to my kids while I struggle to breathe. But it wasn't like that. It hasn't been like that. And you and I shared a conversation by text just a few days ago where as we grow in age, we take a look at our physical health, and things were off for me. And so I had to see some specialists who said, okay, it's not really what you think, and you don't have to worry about it right now. But through all of that, it wasn't so much a fear of, my expiration date has been moved up markedly. It's okay. Well, I mean, you know what my first thought was? If God, if you're calling me home through this very possible disease, it must mean that my work is finished, and so that signals that the book was the last.
All you had to do was hit publish. That was the last thing that we had to do.
And now here's the other shoe.
Yeah.
It drops. But and I prayed about that because the diagnosis could have been very serious. And I prayed about that, and I said, "Is my work done here, or do you want me to continue to practice the things that we put forth in this little book?" And I strongly believe the answer is keep working here on earth. So the bottom line to all that was I trusted him because he's faithful to all of his other promises. It's never been misplaced for me, and I knew whatever he had in store, it was right for me because he's taken care of the hugely big things already. My sin, my mortality, and what's going to happen after.
Yeah, that's a lot more important than I think we often imagine, especially in a day and age where people are struggling with anxiety and fear and all kinds of things, so much more than we ever have, at least as far as statistics and surveys and whatever. People are depressed, anxious, borderline despair, right? All kinds of things associated with that.
And with all social media and all the electronic means of interacting with people around the world almost instantly.
We still feel lonely. We still, yeah.
That's where it's going. Loneliness is rampant, and therefore, that whole idea of depression and who loves me, who gets me, who can I count on, all those things. So it goes right back to the major themes that I just pitched of what's so sweet about Jesus. We have hope, we have peace, we know somebody's with us. It doesn't make our world a whole lot easier a lot of times, but we've got somebody who cares for us and loves us and won't abandon us.
Yeah. Sometimes it makes it harder. In fact, I would say there are a couple of things related to that. One, of course, is the book, which we'll get into. And it would be a good transition, right? We're challenging people here. But the other thing you mentioned in your talk about forgiveness, I forget exactly how you said it, but you've been a Christian this many years, and you still have all these things that happen even now that make you feel ashamed or you feel terrible about what you've done or what you haven't done, and God forgives you for those things. And I was thinking about that, and I guess the question for you would be, do you feel like you notice more things the longer you go along? Meaning, like, the closer you get to God, the stronger your relationship with Jesus, the more glaring your failures to be who he created us to be?
Well, it does cause pain. I think that's a good thing. It's a sign of a healthy conscience. And when you read the Bible, if we flippantly ask for forgiveness, God really wants a broken and contrite heart. Okay, he wants some remorse. He wants some acknowledgement of failure and helplessness, bowing the knee, being in submission because he's God and I'm not. And to recognize that, you use the word glaring, I use the word pain. but it's one of those things where yes and no. Things may or may not necessarily be amplified the longer I'm on this earth and the more I experience failure and forgiveness, because there's also the Holy Spirit transforming me to be more Christ-like day by day. And we've heard this saying before, but it's so true for Christians. Not what I'm going to be, but not what I once was. And yes. So I'm thankful that there's been some progress, that some things in my life have diminished. Some things are becoming more Christ-like, but there's still a way to go. And there will always be a way to go until that last breath when Jesus calls you home.
Yeah.
And so part of me says, yeah, it's, I guess for me, it's more frustration and shame than glaring, like, how can I still do these things and profess a faith? But we also have to acknowledge that while we're on this earth, we're mortal, and we do things just like St. Paul, said, I do things I actually don't want to do. and is this body of human nature, is this body of death that we still have in us. I guess as the years have progressed for me, and for you as well, it's become more painfully obvious the things left undone, which are also transgressions against God's will, when he calls us to love our neighbor, when he calls us to share the good news of Jesus, and we fail to act well towards others, when we close our lips for fear of offending somebody or jeopardizing our relationship with them. Those are causes for me to repent a lot more than me shooting my mouth off and saying something stupid or cross, or me being judgmental of
Yeah.
somebody else, or me thinking impure things, or whatever. What weighs on my mind is how hurting the people are, and the lack of hope, the lack of peace, the lack of a clean conscience that they have because they don't know Jesus. I just alluded to this in my opening things about facing a serious diagnosis. So I was at a cancer center yesterday in the waiting room, waiting to be called for the doctor to give me better news. And you look around, and you look at all the people who are in treatment. The waiting room was full. And one of the sadder comments I heard that yesterday morning, as one of the doors opened and they call a patient back, the nurse said, "I finally found a room for you." The finally found a room means the place was packed behind the scenes as well. All these people facing serious treatment, and maybe many of them headed toward their own demise. Do those people have the hope that I have? Do those people have the peace that I have? Do those people have the assurance that all this is going to be healed, and I'm going to feel great, when I'm with Jesus? So you think in terms of, why am I not, sitting in this room every day, talking to, getting to know people who come here several times a week, and just saying,
they might not let you do that.
Yeah. Well, comments for another time and another discussion, but that's just an example of people in our society who are hurting, and that so more and more the idea of things left undone, things that I could and should do, not out of legalism, but out of gratitude to my Lord, to show others his love, to show others the forgiveness, to show others the life that he promises. It is something we ought to be bubbling over, every day.
Yeah. Well, so I asked you that question for a couple of reasons. One, I think there are a lot of people, even among Christians, that would say, "Oh, well, you've been at this for a long time. You said you had a lot more miles on that body than I do, right? Like, I mean, you'd think you'd have figured it out, right? Aren't Christians supposed to be better and better all the time?" And that's why I kind of phrased it the way I did. But also there's this idea that there's actually a C.S. Lewis quote I saw on Facebook yesterday. I'm just going to read it real quick. It says, "Imagine yourself as a living house. God comes in to rebuild that house. At first, perhaps, you can understand what he's doing. He's getting the drains right and stopping the leaks in the roof and so on. You knew that those jobs needed doing, and so you're not surprised. But presently, he starts knocking the house about in a way that hurts abominably and does not seem to make any sense. What on earth is he up to? The explanation is that he is building quite a different house from the one you thought of. Throwing out a new wing here, putting on an extra floor there, running up towers, making courtyards. You thought you were being made into a decent little cottage, but he is building a palace. He intends to come and live in it himself." I just thought that was interesting, that, the work that God starts on in us is a lot more than we may think. We're a lot further from where we're supposed to be than we probably realize at the beginning. And that's why I do think that this book and what we're encouraging people to do is something that ultimately leads to us recognizing.
To make clear that I'm not trained clergy, I'm not ordained, I haven't gone to seminary, didn't go to any prostitutes. He's picked fishermen with coarse mouths and asked them to be his servants, and then empowered them and equipped them. And a lot of times they were faced with sporting credentials to people, because the people would, and who are you? Why do you have the right to, talk to us or say what we should be doing? But that's God's way. These days, book jackets are covered with a person's credentials and endorsements from people that are even more credentialed. Okay. And yet that's not God's way. It's not to say these people are bad for having great experience. I just don't have that in the faith world. I'm just me, kind of ordinary that way. My background is I've got a lot of education, a couple of master's degrees and a PhD, and they're pretty much all in psychology, but not the kind of psychology that puts you in a room and talks to you to guide you. It's really very applied psychology, things on training and skill development, things on how people interact in the world, and understanding human capabilities, not the least of which is people's motives and motivations and the things that drive them. So I've had a lot of that and expressed that education in a lot of because all of those are big components as far as how people behave in the real world, at work or in their churches, or teaching at the Air Force Academy and at officer training school, managing